with them on some of the impacts that will, in terms of parking and getting large equipment in and demolition. And we have heard the concerns from the community, the business community, and we will be working with those. Fortunately, we have actually 2 developers doing 3 projects. We'll work with those 2 teams to make sure those impacts are managed properly, and we limit the amount of disturbance that happens downtown over that 12 to 16 month construction period. Speaking of construction downtown, Narberth Avenue Bridge is moving forward. Right-of-way offers have been made to the property owners. One of the property owners is the borough, actually. Of the 6 properties that need to be acquired, either fee simple or temporary easements, the 5 of them are, one of them is going to be a little difficult because it's the National Passenger Railroad Association, also known as Amtrak, so we're working through that Leviathan and that bureaucracy to get that. That's really our focus of our energies, but the other 5 offers are out there, and we expect them to be accepted, hopefully without having to initiate basically the condemnation process, which gets a little stickier. 201 Sabine, we have finalized contract details. We had a little hiccup with bonding and insurance, and that is corrected as of yesterday. We have a meeting with the contractor next week, and we will have a start date sometime in the next 14 days. So that is going to be a 60-day project starting in the next couple weeks to get done before December. Which leads me into budget discussion, and this is an opportunity for us to get a conversation or some feedback, or let me tell you where things stand right now. We had a very fruitful conversation last meeting about Sabine Avenue, 201 Sabine Avenue planning services. We agreed we needed some outside help. We can price that and bake that into our budget in planning services. That's the charge I got from the committee, and I expect that to show up in the operating budget, draft operating budget. We are moving along very, very smoothly. I have to say, this is my 4th budget. We are really further along at this point in the year than we ever have before, because it's my 4th budget, but also because we are just way more better organized right now. We have input coming from a very experienced management team. So infrastructure-related issues that Ed is charged with is to budget for parks and maintenance, equipment vehicle maintenance, shade tree maintenance, and we also tap highway aid funds for roadway maintenance, paint, materials, and signage, and we're going to get some good ideas on what those costs are going to look like next year so we can budget appropriately. The one thing you all should be aware of that's infrastructure and budget related is that when the Narberth Avenue Bridge construction project begins, we're going to need lots of money to pay contractors. So we may have a cash flow issue in 2020, 2021, and 2022 because it figures to be an 18-month project. It could hit those 3 fiscal years. What I mean by having a cash flow problem is you might get a bill from your contractor for $250,000 that need to be paid in 30 days. Well, you pay the contractor, that check gets cashed, you file for reimbursement from PennDOT, and there's a lag time between filing and the reimbursement, and we need enough dollars in our capital fund to absorb those kinds of invoices, and we're going to be running some cash flow analysis on that. And that will affect our budget, because if we have to borrow and it's not really a tax anticipation note, it's more like a payday loan, if you can think of it that way. If we have to borrow money on a short-term basis, then there's financing costs that are going to be added in that have to be paid for out of the general fund. So just FYI, I don't know what those are yet, but we're working on that complex issue and trying to model that for next year. And that's my manager's report. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could, sorry, I'm looking through the lighting thing, make a clarification. Our choices are going to be warm white or white.
Oh, warm white. Okay.
Warm white or white.
Okay.
I think he recommended warm white. So, thanks,
let's move on to the Shade Tree Commission recommendations at this time. And I'm just wondering, Rick, if you just why don't you just come up to the table and join us, because it'll be a little easier. If you would. So the Shade Tree Commission provided the Infrastructure Committee several recommendations, including a kind of draft of the shade tree, a redraft of the shade tree ordinance, an idea about including shade trees, a permit application for the removal of trees, and yeah. So Rick's going to actually walk us through these recommendations, if you would.
Sure.
Thank you.
I guess if it's okay, let's start with the request for amendments of the shade tree ordinance. As you know, we've had a lot of big trees taken down recently by residents, and there's been quite a bit of uproar about a few of them. And so we took a look at our ordinance and realized that it was severely lacking. We say all the time the borough has control of the trees in the rights of way, and if somebody wants to remove one, they need to get a permit. And so we talked to Ed and said, well, what is that process? And he said, there is no process. There's not actually even a permit application right now. So we took a look at the ordinance. At our last meeting, we just went through the existing ordinance line by line and made recommendations for improvements based on an ordinance from the borough of Lansdale. So basically what we're asking for on the ordinance is to pass our recommendations on to the solicitor at this point. I'm a registered landscape architect. I do a lot of planning work. I write a lot of ordinances in my professional life. The language that I wrote in the markup on this one is, I feel like it's pretty good, but the solicitor needs to look at it. And we had a list of questions as well, some things that we just couldn't answer. So in order to move this forward, that's what we're asking for next, unless, of course, any of you have any issues to discuss about it before even getting there.
Are there few enough markups here that you can just summarize them quickly?
Sure.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, actually implementing a permit process, I think is probably the most important. The other big change would be actually enforcing the permit process for removal of a tree involving the Shade Tree Commission. This is modeled somewhat on the way that Lower Merion Township has their process set up. If someone wants to remove one of the trees, they apply for a permit, and then they have to come in and talk to the Shade Tree Commission as well to actually explain why they want to do it, if there's good reason for it, and work with the Shade Tree Commission to determine whether they have good reason to remove a tree. A lot of the recommendations are about the borough really actually taking control of the rights of way. So there's a section in there too about, you can't pave over the right of way, you can't be dumping stone in the right of way. Some requirements about if you're going to remove a tree, making sure that it's done properly, that people don't remove a tree and then leave a stump, for instance.
Does that only apply to homeowners, or is that for commercial development properties as well?
I think this would apply to everyone. It would be part of just the shade tree ordinance is its own standalone ordinance in the code.
Yes.
So it's not in subdivision, it's not in any section that's only for
It governs only land that's in the right of way, basically, by the ordinance by its terms.
correct.
There could be additional, right, authority within the SALDO, say, on.
Absolutely.
That would be private land.
Right.
And could possibly delegate some degree of authority to shade tree.
Mhm.
I don't know if we can grant that authority directly or if it has to be sort of through whoever is authorized to make this all road approval for this council, but in any event. Right, I mean, that seems like the distinction.
Right, right. And that process has been working for us fairly well so far. Developers have been coming into our meetings. In some cases, they've been asked by planning or borough council. In other cases, they've come in preemptively to chat. So the subdivision process has been working well for us, separate from our ordinance.
Okay, the next recommendation.
Okay, so the next two sort of go together. I'd written two letters, one dated September 10th with a subject line of tree planting at sale of property, and another letter dated September 11th with the subject request for waiver of curb requirements. And so these two letters together are asking for sort of a change in the way we look at the streetscape. So starting with the first one, tree planting at sale of property. Again, as I just said with the ordinance updates, we say all the time the borough has control of the rights of way. The Shade Tree Commission has control of planting within the rights of way. So we're talking about powers we already have. We're looking to actually trigger those powers when a new homeowner comes into the borough. We've been, for the past, I think, 3 years now, looking for homeowners who want trees planted in the rights of way, who volunteer to offer a donation to pay for a tree to get planted. And the first few years, it was great. We had tons of people jump right up and want to plant trees. And now we've sort of gone through that group of really excited people, and we're scratching and clawing to find people to plant trees. So we had the thought that, well, when new people move in, we're already looking at curbs, we're already looking at sidewalks. Trees are an important part of the streetscape as well. So this seemed like a time when we could basically act on the powers that we already have. Go ahead.
No, I just have a question.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
have we confirmed that with our solicitor? I mean, I know there are powers within, the rights of way, the right of way area. We have as borough power to say you can't take that tree down, right? Probably. Say if you want to put a tree in, we can improve the species and the type to make sure it's appropriate. But do we as a borough have the power to say you must plant a tree in that right of way, regardless of when it happens? Like, say it's not during, but I don't think we've ever done that. During at the time of transfer of property, that could be a trigger. But do you think the borough has the power to pass an ordinance today saying we have authority to say you got to plant a tree there? We think that's a good spot for a tree.
And also too,
I don't know. I don't know if we've asked John, and we might. I just don't know.
Yeah, with that question too, do we have the power? And then what's the process? And then what's the any power that we have that's legislatively created? Any power that has to have an administrative process or administrative ruling is made, and in that process you assume certain responsibilities, liabilities, outcomes, and there also has to be appeals to every single power. Every single administrative ruling that we make has an appeals process, and whether that's at the zoning hearing board, the district court, or whatever. So we have to think it's a big question as well. Yeah.
So I propose that we got this recommendation of tree planting. There's some big questions that need to be addressed by the solicitor and the professional staff. Why don't we just leave it there for now, give the solicitor and the professional staff a chance to digest that and get back to us on some of these questions. And if you have more questions, maybe you can engage offline.
Well, what you just said was really thought-provoking, because it would apply to actually using the permit process that's at this point never really been used, right? We have this sort of, you have to get a permit, but you're right, thinking down the road, just creating a valid permit application, as you have given us a great draft, that's only the first step, because we do need to have a full process in place, including wherever the appeals go to. Did your research, would Lansdale or Loraine reveal what that full administrative process is?
No, this one is new. This isn't based on another township. But to go back to your first question, we did not talk to the solicitor, but our interpretation of our existing ordinance seemed to us that we had the authority to do it. It reads, "The Shade Tree Commission of the Borough of Narberth shall have custody and control of the shade trees in and upon the public streets of the borough, and shall have authority to plant, transplant, remove such trees." So we read that authority to
A lot of
plant.
shalls in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is giving us the power to do it. As for process and appeals,
Okay.
we,
No, I think that's a fair, but what's in our ordinance doesn't necessarily mean you have the power to do it, that's why I would like to. So that's what we're
Well,
doing.
it's sort of like.
We haven't done it, it hasn't been tested.
It's
so-
analogous to the trash, it's analogous to the trash
So,
issue.
I would
It's
make
like, you can say that people can't put their trash in the public cans, but if you can't enforce it, it's like, this, I mean, I think that's a good point. which is
But-
there's a- And people can appeal the enforcement, there has to be all of the due process. So Sean's got one.
But you're already doing all the right stuff and putting this in front of
I
John,
have
and
one.
he'll give us his thoughts.
I have one suggestion for us to be productive together and collaborate with the Shade Tree Commission and to clarify some points. And it's a request. I would ask the committee and I would request that the Shade Tree Commission put together, this is great work, put together a brief in a sense that gets at the point of what is the intent, what's the intention of the changes that the Shade Tree Commission wants to enact. Clarify what the intentions are, and clearly what I see is, some powers and some processes and outcomes coming out of this. But if you clarify the intention of it, then council can really wrestle with the policy that is embedded in everything we're talking about right now. And then that's really council's work, is to decide what the policy is going to be and the expected outcomes from that policy. And then staff and the solicitor can really work out the details of who goes and inspect it, how it works, how the appeals process works, what all the impacts are. Because there's liability impacts here from a general liability standpoint that I've had experience with. I've been in a deposition where we've talked about the shade tree ordinance and what control and custody means and how it impacted that particular case. But that's sort of nuts and bolts things that I don't think is helpful for elected and appointed people to get involved in. I would like the focus to be, and I suggest the focus be on what's the intention, what's the outcome, how does that distill into a policy that council can say, hey, this is the good idea embedded in all this information, and then we kind of have a plan to work through with our professional staff, the legal side, the insurance side, the administrative side, to craft a really good support foundation for the policy. So that's my suggestion.
okay.
That's a really good point, well taken.
Yeah.
That's a, yeah.
So it could be like 10 commandments or something.
It is.
It's the whereases, it's the whereases.
It is,
and
although
it's the-
I think that receiving initial guidance from the solicitor about the scope of our powers would be a helpful part of that initial brief, because it's going to affect what kind of policies we can or can't set. Right?
So there's going to
It's
be
going
maybe,
to set boundaries around what we can do. We may as well do that in the beginning rather than having setting policies and having them kicked back
okay,
through revision. Does that make sense?
yep.
Yeah, I think it will be iterative. There will be some sort of flag in the ground set, and it'll cycle, and it'll improve with time and work.
So we could move to the next request. I'm mindful of time because I know we still want to talk about the traffic and engineer's proposal, and that's really important to get to before the,
I also think we're going to have a substantial amount of public comment on behalf of a representative from the cycling club.
I'm not
Yes,
sure we're
correct.
gonna have time for public comment today, but we can, let's finish with Shade Tree, and then we'll move from there.
This will be pretty brief. Basically, the request for waiver of curb requirements, as it is right now, if a curb needs to be installed, basically it has to be installed. There's no process for requesting a waiver. And in some cases, we see some of our biggest, oldest trees that stretch out into the street, and we just know there are going to be instances where if a curb needs to be installed, some of these big trees are going to have to come down. And Ed and his staff right now have to go by the rules that are on paper. He doesn't have any leeway to make a decision about valuing a tree over a stretch of curb. So we're asking for that to be considered as part of this overhaul as well, to add in some sort of waiver process there.
Could I have you include sidewalks? Because it goes beyond curbs also. As one who processes curbs and sidewalk permits. Curbs, yep, definitely, because you have to go down so deep for it. But there's also issues when trees conflict with sidewalks. If you walk up North Wynwood, you've got blacktop versus concrete, and that was in an effort to say not cut into those. We don't have any, excuse me, we don't have any legislation on our books approving that. That was just an administrative, yeah, okay, it'll function as a sidewalk. I'd encourage you to expand it to include also sidewalks.
Sounds good.
Concur?
It's going to have to be on a case-by-case basis, yeah.
Yeah, waiver request. Well, thank you very much for coming today, walking us through this, and for all of these recommendations. And I think, can you see there will be a process that will take place over the coming months?
Yeah. So for my clarification though, are we able to move the ordinance forward, or are we waiting for me to write up this brief, or can anything get moving right now, or are we waiting till next month till I get something else on paper?
I think my sense is that for the council to act, we're going to need the larger, so for the sake of, right? And I think it's not something that's that new to the Shade Tree Commission. It's like it's actually what you and Carson say, and every time we meet, like, the borough is committed to restoring the shade tree canopy according to the Morris Arboretum survey, and
Right.
you actually have a really big vision as a commission, and I think it's really just like getting the council to reaffirm that we want to see certain outcomes through our policy making, and then the borough staff have a charge. Is that and that's congruent with your request, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You want to add more to that?
Don't lose sight of the fact that our ordinance project, we just got the final draft yesterday. Really excited about it. And so the entire borough code is going to be redone, reorganized, renamed. Many of the things that were addressed in your ordinance review, the penalties, of just skimming through this penalty, it's already been fixed. And so I'm just saying that for any potential ordinance changes, if we could just wait. I know it's tough, a couple more months, but a lot of these little things will be taken care of because we went through and readjusted everything and removed, jail time for things. Just updated it. So
Great.
I'm excited about that. That's coming. I'm hoping to have that adopted before January 1st.
Okay.
It's a big deal.
Yeah,
And it's
I definitely think it makes
Yeah,
sense.
everything.
Hold off.
I know it's tough. It's
No,
only,
it's not that,
but-
it makes complete sense.
It's amazing. That's gonna be
I'm excited about it.
Do you have more questions?
Just when I write up that brief, it's been, I'm assuming, addressed back to this committee again, or directly to council at this
I would
point?
send it to council president at this point, and let's say that you met with the Shade Tree Commission and that this request was made. Yeah.
Very
Does
good.
that make sense to you? Are you good with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks so much. See you. So let's go to the next item, which is Windsor Avenue, and I think Sean is going to lead us in a discussion about the highway or the traffic engineer's proposal, pending proposal.
The engineer met with us August 21st and presented and rehashed the results of the phase one, which was the basically the public meeting process, the surface information about how Windsor Avenue is used, to talk to staff, and to come up with idealized cross-sections and to have kind of a straw vote with the public as to what were preferences. And that was the outcome of phase 1. Phase 2, which would be another step in the process, would be to develop a concept plan, an actual plan, that is not going to be topographically surveyed, because that is beyond, just doesn't make sense to go out and pay for that survey. It just doesn't make financial sense. But to develop a plan that illustrates what the vision is for the corridor from Iona to North Wynwood Avenue in detail. And then that plan is the foundation for us to make decisions about capital improvements going forward. We can slowly, over time, enact that plan. And what the traffic engineer needs from us, from the Borough Council, is some input to the features and design program that they should be following as they develop this plan. And they talked about some of those things at the meeting. Some of the improvements that we've been talking about are going to be really expensive. If you're going to do extensive stormwater treatment facilities on Windsor Avenue, we have a lot of utility involvement, and anytime you start doing improvements in 3 dimensions going down, costs go up. And some of the, I hope what also came out of that presentation was that we can do kind of tactical urbanism improvements, which are very low cost improvements, to outline, if you wanted to put bump outs in the streets, don't build the curb yet, put temporary features in the location of where the curb might be one day, and test it out, see how the roadway functions after a 6 to 8 month period. This plan that they would be developing would be based on real data. They were going to assess traffic flow at certain intersections in the area to make sure whatever they propose works. They are going to look at the directional issue to solve the problem. Does Windsor function? Can Windsor function as a unidirectional street? Which direction should it be? Right now, it's a little bit confusing unless you frequent Windsor Avenue. You could probably take a green driver, put them on Windsor Avenue, and they're going to go down some part of that road the wrong way at some point. Or they're going to blow through a stop sign that they shouldn't, or they're going to stop at an intersection that there isn't a stop sign. We have traffic flow confusion there. It's actually a miracle that we haven't had more incidents, in my unprofessional opinion, than we do. It just really speaks to the adaptability of people who drive, and there are some safe realities to that street, it being congested and 2 lanes of traffic and 2 rows of parking on both sides. You just have to go slow on the street, and slowing things down is one of our big sort of Mount Rushmore goals that we want to make. So where we are at now is is the traffic engineer is looking for me to communicate back to them the elected officials' desire to continue to pursue this project, and to give them feedback as to what they should be focusing on in their design program as they put together a proposal. And the proposal will have a dollar value. So the time is ripe to talk about the proposal, as the dollar value will go into our operating budget for next year, and we can make decisions about what we have to budget for traffic engineering fees and what other types of incidental services they can do for us next year in that traffic engineering fee budget, the usual stuff. Hey, look into this issue for us. Hey, we have this other issue, take it up with us. This year we had a very expensive encounter with our traffic engineer to talk about the bridge and formulating a plan for reopening it to pedestrian and vehicle traffic. So those things just pop up during the year, so we need a little padding in our budget.
I don't know.
Do you have a comment?
Yeah.
Is this a good moment? To
Yes, please.
Have a, okay, please.
So I think something we've talked about, at least I know it's come up this summer, late spring, early summer, was whether or not we are as well served as we might be by this particular traffic engineer, specifically with regard to developing concepts for the Windsor Avenue corridor project. because, the people who felt that the original effort was not what we were looking for. And the representation, or as you call it, the rehash of phase one, was, I think, a little, it was a little bit more detailed, but I think that we've had discussions about whether or not, all right, phase one is complete, we've got something. We're moving on to a separate phase. We don't have a contractual relationship with McMahon, right? For phase two, does it make sense to put this out to multiple providers for phase two and see what other kind of proposals come back? Or do we just want to work with only the one provider?
So could we focus today, because I think we're going to come to the larger council with something on sort of the what rather than the who for the moment. So because I think that's a totally legitimate question. I just wonder if we can focus on what would we want from a traffic engineer next? And I think that's the question you're asking us is what's the scope of this next effort? Is that
The scope is to develop a conceptualized plan that we can then bid, price, get grant support for, and so forth.
We're looking for specific choices. We want you to develop something that's one lane in one direction with parking and a bike lane or a two-way bike lane. I mean, specifically, develop these plans and no others. You want us to make the choices, right?
So if we can just have a little conversation of it, do you think we're ready to, as a town, specify what that Windsor Avenue corridor should be? Does the traffic engineer think we're ready to give them that level of detail?
The traffic engineer can give you whatever level of detail you need.
Well, so here's my thought. Now, I'm just thinking as sort of a common practically, I could be wrong, and please weigh in. I guess I'd want to know from the traffic engineer. But it seems to me that before we address any details of Windsor Avenue, we need to be reassured by the traffic engineer that our intersections are functioning and that the direction of flow of our one-way network makes sense and works. Because I'm just aware that there's a lot of complaints among residents about sort of the amount of traffic. And there's always been concern about cut-through traffic, and it certainly hasn't gotten any better in 30 years. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So especially if you talk to people who live on Windsor Avenue, they're just blown away by just the volume, And then I know that just as someone who drives around a lot, there's problems with a lot of our intersections and the way they function, especially the North Wingwood Road intersections, both at Windsor and at Halford Avenue. Not Sabine yet, but those other two. And there's even, sometimes there's a problem even with the Haverford-Montgomery intersection. And so I'm just wondering if we've got that right enough to even say what we want on Windsor and for it to function, for it to perform in the way that we'd be satisfied with. Do you see what I'm pointing to? It's a bigger question.
It's almost like you're saying you can't design Windsor Avenue independently of all the streets. It almost is.
I just worry that we'll make a big commitment, and I like the tactical urbanism approach. I think that's something that makes sense to do anywhere, everywhere. And maybe if we're going to start with Windsor Avenue, so we develop a vocabulary of interventions that work for everyone can experience them. That seems great. We could do that, but I just concerned we're going to go to a lot of effort and we're sort of missing the big problem, which is the direction of flow. I don't know anyone who doesn't come to Narberth the first time and get horribly lost and turned around and circle all over the place, which is incredibly wasteful of fuel resources. But I don't know if that can be fixed either. It could be it was designed in intentionally. I don't know. This may be too big a question for right now, but I guess I'd want to know from the traffic engineer, do they agree with that assessment? That if we just address, if the council or the borough give them instruction about how we want Windsor Avenue to be treated, that we're missing some missing, that we're just inviting like a missed, more dysfunction. That's that's.
They will not, they will evaluate traffic flow in their intersection analysis in the context of the traffic flow around Windsor Avenue. It won't be done in isolation. I think that's counter to like the whole practice of traffic engineering in general. They will evaluate intersections other than just the ones on Windsor Avenue. So the solution will be integrated, and they are going to look at traffic flow and volume and patterns.
So let's say the council were to say, this is hypothetical, we're going to do protected bike lanes in 2 directions, one-way Windsor Avenue, North Wynwood to Iona. We want to do it the whole way, one way, protected bike lanes, the solution that they offered, right? Are they going to do an analysis of the Haverford North Wynwood intersection? Because that's going to have an impact. Are they going to do an analysis of the flow, like what happens when you close the center of town for a street festival, or when, there's all these alternate problems that arise, I think one of the business district people mentioned that the reason Windsor Avenue goes 2 ways on that section had to do with how you get out of town if Haverford Avenue is closed. Like, how you, now of course you can always go up to Sabine, but anyway, that's the analysis they'll do once we give them a marching orders on Windsor Avenue. It's like that. Is that?
I know they were going to look at 4 intersections as part of their plan, and John had said that would be sufficient. At least 4 intersections. I think he might have said 6. I don't recall the details of it. But planning for sort of unusual instances is more like, I think, an administrative, something we could do on the staff level wise to discuss detouring and those kinds of plans.
Okay.
Because those things pop up all the time with emergency services and planned events.
So
we've had great practice about the last 4 years. Well, no.
Yeah, you have. But so the council really could just focus on like what strategy?
Their analysis would be based on normative traffic patterns. That's the whole point of their traffic analysis. So they would collect a lot of data that would be it would be, sorry, I guess. You can't bring cute children and not distract me with that. Hi. Oh, I know.
You should have more cute children.
This is who you need to plan for.
It's for sure. So do you think the council's, I'm going to ask everyone here, do you think the council's ready to say this is, like, to actually discuss which solution we want on Windsor Avenue of the menu that you provided at the last meeting?
I think as a committee, we should raise it on Wednesday and try to have, maybe prepare something to refresh people's sort of recollection of what they proposed and why. Maybe it would make sense for us to facilitate that discussion and find out if council's ready to do that. I don't think as a committee, I don't.
No, I'm just wondering are you ready for the council to have that discussion? Like, just decide, like, this is what we want to do.
You have to decide if you want the traffic engineer to keep working on this project.
That's what he's
or nothing's
saying.
going to happen.
Like, he's saying it falls in the court council, either give guidance or.
As a committee, as one committee member, I think absolutely we have to keep the traffic engineer working on this problem. Are you ready as a council member to say this is the solution we want to pursue?
I mean, I'm ready to have a discussion about it.
Okay.
I don't have a very, very clearly formed, like, it should be this versus that.
I mean, I have preferences.
I have preferences, but they're not incredibly strong. I mean, that could be the problem. You get into a situation where people are fairly flexible. You don't have, but I think we have to take it to full council and see. Maybe somebody will articulate a very, very strong vision and persuade us. I don't know.
But is this in line with what you're asking council to discuss?
Yeah, because what would happen if the answer were yes, make sure it addresses these issues, Then I put the call into John, John puts a proposal together, I get a number, that number gets baked into next year's budget so we can actually do it.
Okay.
Or the answer is no. And we don't do it, that's fine too.
Is there,
That's,
to Michelle's point, is it simple to prepare like a quick slide presentation of the options to sort of stoke, to sort of prime the conversation a little bit?
to be clear, we're not picking any option that was presented in phase one. Those are ideas that were surfaced that will be investigated in the next phase, but they need to conduct a more detailed investigation of traffic flow and present council with a coherent plan that might have a protected bike lane in one instance, or it might have a prioritized traffic flow scenario in it. And then you'll have that decision.
So based on their research.
Based on the more information about how our intersections work, how traffic flows in town. But if it's fine the way it is, don't spend the money engineering another solution.
No, I don't think it's fine the way it is to you.
It's not optimal.
Okay. Do you think we should put money in the budget for the traffic engineer?
So if that is that the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, if we can put money in the budget, I mean, if should it emerge that
I thought you were
council just can't come to a decision about what we want to do, then we just reallocate
Well, I
that
thought
to
you
something
were,
else.
I thought what you were asking was for more guidance on detail on what they would have in their proposal. It sounds like their proposal's already, they have a proposal. I'm confused now.
They don't have a proposal.
Can you help me with this? Do you get where we are? I'm getting exactly where we are.
I thought you were asking, basically, they've come before us twice now and said, here are some general ideas, this is what we sort of get from your community, maybe these are sort of priorities, but you need to now tell us what priorities you want us to explore. So we want you to explore solutions that, I would think some basic parameters that have, that prioritize bicycle and pedestrian access, or that prioritize traffic calming, that have traffic flow in one direction, that ensure particular safety measures and traffic calming measures across from the park.
Right.
Yeah.
But we
I mean,
haven't been
tho-
clear
that-
about-
those kind of goals,
Haven't we
right?
already been clear that that's actually what we've been asking for? I don't know.
Here's the question, do you want them to keep working on this project? That's really the question.
Yes.
Okay.
I want someone to keep
But I
working on this
thought- I thought
project.
you
I don't
were-
know if I want them to keep working on this project, back to my earlier point.
Yeah,
That's a
and I
different-
think
that's a different
I think that's an appropriate question. Because, yeah, I don't know.
Maybe them, I don't know. I would like to know what if there are any other worthwhile providers to sort of get their take on this, as we're the gap between two contractual relationships. The same project.
I think, and maybe that's like a staff decision to just to find us the best, who they consider to be the best service provider at this moment.
We're asking for proposals, right?
Yeah, but I mean, do you want to
So we're
interview
not,
traffic?
we're not, our next step.
Are you saying that as a council member, you want to interview traffic engineers? Because I don't know that we want to get into that level.
We have an idea that we want a particular phase of development of a proposal for Windsor Avenue to take place based on preliminary findings, right? And so it's not, to me, a foregone conclusion that the same engineering firm would need to do phase two. It could be structured as a request for proposals from different providers. Something we've talked about before, but we may or may not want to do it. Right, so our next step is going to be to look at a
That's
proposal,
the-
not to sign the contract. It's going to look at a proposal first and then sign the contract.
Yeah, one of council's fundamental powers is to make contracts. So that's your simple answer. You can make a contract with anybody you want.
I think you need to separate the budget item from, well, we're looking at two different things, budget item versus professional. I'm hearing some consternation about the professional, if that professional should be the one to do the project. Separate that from, do you think this is a worthwhile project and should it be funded? If yes, what is that value? That value then
Right.
plugs into the budget.
Exactly.
Then you can have the conversation of who does it, right? I don't think by putting the money into the budget
That's what I'm trying to say.
is saying,
Well,
yes,
what?
McMahon, do it. No, it's budget for this project.
I think I'm just puzzled because all this to me seems self-evident, like that's what we've been doing, and I'm wondering.
I guess it's a
What we're-
point where we need to up the ante because phase 2 is going to be more costly than phase 1.
Mhm.
I think that's what we're, like,
Okay.
what's that value going to be in the bump to make
It'd be
it
helpful
happen?
to see the proposal. To know if we want to fund it. I mean, this is the chicken and an egg.
Right,
So-
exactly. But to maximize, a proposal that we can feel like we can make a decision, do we want to fund it or not? I think what I'm hearing from Sean, I might be wrong, is but the council needs to put something, inject something into the process at that point. We want to ensure that the proposal comes back as something you go, oh, this looks like it's worthwhile to fund.
Yeah,
If we
but-
don't give more guidance, we just get a phase 1
What is
again.
it that we're injecting that we haven't already injected?
Well,
That's what I'm trying to
maybe
understand.
just a council-wide clear discussion that results in a clear list of these are the things we want to see in any proposal. We want to see one-way traffic, or we want to see two-way traffic. We want to see two-way bike lane, or we want to see provision for, whatever, different chicanes, like temporary chicanes. So, I mean, I gather you're saying you want to see specific
Is that
or
correct?
specific focus on particular elements for Windsor Avenue, not just, otherwise maybe Bob, maybe your point is just sort of like, well, what else is there to say?
Exactly, yeah.
Well, I mean, because you said
I'm
you're not-
asking what else do we say?
Or asking us to
What
choose
other
between menu
options?
1, 2, 3. They've given us sort of 3 visions. Pick the one you want them to develop. That's what I felt at
I
first.
felt
you were
that the
asking.
traffic, at the last presentation, I felt the traffic engineer understood. So,
Okay.
I did. Did you feel the traffic engineer
I
understood?
have no idea.
Well, they made a presentation. I thought they understood. I thought the options that they presented addressed the concerns that the residents expressed through the evening of investigation, and that they're presenting options that seem like they could be workable. You have to help us because what do you need from the council at this time? Just to say we're going to spend money, we're going to allocate money in the budget. Because I'm in favor of that.
Why don't we get the proposal, because I think that there's too much flying around in terms of what's going to happen at the end of this next phase of work. Let's figure out what it's going to
I'd
run
love
to
to see
do.
the proposal.
I think they've been really clear about what needs to happen from where we are today and to where we can get to, where we'll have a.
Okay, this discussion initiated with you saying that they need more guidance from council before they can do a proposal, not that we needed a budget item. And it's concluding with saying, well, what we really need is a budget item from council. They already know. So I feel like the discussion is morphed and I no longer
That's why I'm
actually know what we're
confused.
talking about.
That's why. But this is my confusion as well.
I share your confusion.
And I'd like us to continue to press on with solving the livability of our streets, and that our streets are priority for pedestrians, bikes, other vehicles, other wheeled vehicles, and then cars and parking, and that all those things have to happen in the safest and most livable way. And I felt that the last presentation they presented some options that could work. And I don't know what else there is to say other than we need them to come back to us with what they think is solutions. But if we need to prioritize one-way, bike, protected bike, all that, then we should have a discussion with the council and give a sense of what the residents would prioritize.
And some of our prioritization will be set by the budget number that we choose, because there's some things you just can't do with the budget. Or we're just budgeting for engineering services now, right? Not the total cost of the project. So I take that back. That's a mistake.
Are you getting what you need from this conversation?
I think so. I'm confused too, but
We were trying to be of help in moving this along. Okay. Can we move to public comment at this point? Okay. Public comment. I have to go in 5 minutes, so if you can keep it to like 3 minutes, that'd be
Minutes ago, so, I'll just make a quick
Thank you.
public comment.
Thank
Sure, Kimberly Buzak, 237 Dudley. I'm here to talk about our continued concerns with the bridge, and I know everyone is tired of talking about it, but I'm not ready to give it up. I'm hearing on a daily basis complaints from the Narborough Cycling Club community about grave safety issues that are happening at the bridge. I went down there yesterday to go to the south side, and on my way back, if I would have been a minute later, I would have been struck by a car going the wrong way over the bridge, speeding over the bridge. It's very upsetting, very upsetting. With this Windsor conversation, I will say that the way the traffic engineer has handled the bridge layout makes me incredibly concerned about what we're going to see with Windsor Avenue. Because the bridge is completely marginalizing the bicyclists. Absolutely. There's no space for the bikes. So what are you seeing? You're seeing bikes biking contraflow in the traffic lane. You're seeing bikes bike up the sidewalk that isn't even an accessible sidewalk on the Marion side. It's all lifted, you're tipping over, you're stopping to yield to pedestrians because you know you shouldn't be on the sidewalk. It's just a very uncomfortable situation. And I'm just furious about it. I'm furious about it. I asked my friend Randy, who works for TPD, he is a traffic planner that Montgomery County Planning Commission hired to do Bike Moco for complete streets. I asked Randy to give it a look, give me a second opinion, what do you see? He didn't concur with the current design. I'm not trying to question our traffic engineer's professional opinion on this, but I asked Randy to come at it from a complete streets perspective, prioritizing the needs of the most vulnerable, the pedestrians and the bicyclists, people in wheelchairs, people in scooters. And what he is seeing, based on the videos I sent him, cars are flying over the bridge. Huge delivery trucks are flying over the bridge. And the chicane that this flipped lane is supposed to be creating is not happening. So Jean and I put together another document that I'm happy to share if anyone wants to see it, with our top 6 continued concerns. And based on our conversations, getting a second opinion, the suggestions that we continue to have for how you create a defined space for the bikes. That way everyone has a space, the cars, the pedestrians, the bikes. I'm happy to send that along if anyone wants to see it. My other beef is, I was told by the traffic engineer at the last meeting that this, as part of the final design, would get a curb cut, would get a poured concrete curb so that bikes could access that shared pathway. 4 months later, it has yet to happen. Okay? So it's putting bikes on the Marion side where there's a lot more pedestrians. It's a lot more treacherous to climb that hill. So at a minimum, if the traffic engineer is not willing to hear us out about some concerns, please put the curb cut here so we can at least safely access the shared walkway, is what I'll say. The other thing, real quick, with the Windsor Avenue project, we've been in this borough now almost 5 years. Every process and project I've seen, they've done stakeholder interviews. That has not happened with Windsor Avenue. I would hope that as part of this process, they would go to New Horizons, they would go to the cycling club, they would go to some other communities that use these streets every single day, and they would say to those groups, come in, let's hear your perceptions about this roadway, so that we can prioritize people and not cars, and not storing cars and moving cars. I'm so tired of hearing about flow. If you create a space for the bikes and the pedestrians, maybe the flow will fix itself. So I'm done having a rant. Thank you for hearing me out. But I'm just really frustrated. We've been living with this bridge design for 4 months now, and every single day I'm hearing stories that are really concerning to me. And I feel like from a public safety perspective, it's just going to take that one day, that one car that keeps going over the bridge illegally. According to Sweet Mabel, they see the same car going over the bridge illegally. It's just going to take one bad scenario where someone on a bike or someone on foot gets struck. So, okay, thank you for hearing me out.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thanks for your clarity and your awareness.
Oh, okay. Thanks. We'll keep.
Can we adjourn the meeting? Meeting's adjourned?